All right, you are live, Hub.
Well, I'm told I'm alive, guys. So welcome, everybody. It is good to have you back with us again in our new form of our podcast. You can be listening to this at any point, anywhere, in your car, on your walk, on your run, in the gym, whatever it might be. Or perhaps you're joining us on YouTube and getting a little extra video to go with it. We really appreciate it. However you are consuming our ShawLocal.com Bears Insider podcast. I am Hub Arkush, and our Shaw Media Group sports editor Kyle Nabors and our ShawLocal.com Bears Insider beat reporter Sean Hammond are here, as they are with me every week. And it's weird. We're in the dog days. We're after the draft. It's the middle of the off season. And, the NFL is still the biggest story in sports, as the other sports seem to struggle to gain their footing this week, last weekend, and this weekend. Rookie mini camps all over the NFL. The Chicago Bears rookie mini camp will actually be on this weekend as I record. That would be May 14th through the 16th. Of course, the schedule release this week. And guys, I know it's funny. I don't even pay attention to the schedule release. I know everybody rushes to analyze it, but the problem I have with it is, and Sean, we have seen this for really the last 10 years in the NFL, but especially the last 3, 4, 5 years. Most of these, well, I shouldn't say most, half these teams are not going to be the same team they were last year. Some that were really good are going to be really bad. Some that were really bad are going to come out of nowhere. So you analyze this schedule based on what you know of these teams last year, but we really don't know what most of these teams are going to. We know what they're going to look like. We don't know what they're going to play like this year.
Yeah, we can try to analyze, how many wins we think the Bears are going to have here, sitting here on in the middle of May, but until we get a week, 2, 3 weeks under our belt where we can actually see these teams playing in action, and that'll make it a little bit easier to start sorting out who's for real and who's not. And it, we'll get a preseason this year, so that will help some, but really, not until week 1 do we really get an idea. And I know we're going to talk about the NFC North a little bit later, but just the obvious one is when you look at the schedule, it's so hard to know with the Green Bay Packers with everything that's going on. How do you predict that game for the Bears? You just can't at this point.
By the way, guys, my wife Candace just pointed out to me that I've got my 35-year-old mug or whatever. Got my Super Bowl mug here.
That's perfect.
Still get the coffee out of it almost every day. It's held up pretty well. Kyle, the one thing that does jump out at me about this Bears schedule, I've never seen this before. And again, I've been doing this 44 years now. I'd have to go back and study and see if it's happened before. It probably has. Maybe they did it for all 32 teams. I haven't looked at anybody else's schedule. But the Bears do not have back-to-back home or road games. They alternate every single week of the season. Invariably, you end up teams playing 2 at home, 2 on the road. And actually, every year there's a few teams that get stuck with a 3-game road trip or a 3-game homestand. And so for this one to come out literally opposite every week, unless it's a concerted effort that the league is making to balance the scales a little bit, that really caught me by surprise.
Yeah, I didn't expect to see that either. I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing. I don't know if I've ever seen a schedule like that. Real quick, if you are watching live on Twitter, if you want to join us on YouTube, you can ask questions over there. We see those in the chat. We can throw those up on the screen. There's a link to that and on Hub's Twitter page right now. But yeah, Hub, I don't know. I can't recall seeing a schedule balance like this.
I thought our friend Larry Mayer over at ChicagoBears.com had either tweeted or written something that this was the first time that's happened for the Bears. I can't find a mention of it now, just doing a quick Google, but I thought I read that somewhere.
I can tell you that in the 20 years I was in their broadcast booth, it never happened because I was, traveling with the team and just, still doing the Westwood One work and looking at schedules. I don't think I've ever seen it for any team before, but, that would take more research than I have time for something that really isn't all that meaningful, except I think it's probably, I think it's probably more good than bad. You don't worry about extended road trips. Obviously, it's nice to be able to stay home for a few weeks, but I think the harder thing in season for these teams is going on the road and having to go a few weeks in a road. And that is the one other thing, Sean, that does jump out about the schedule to me. I tweeted about it earlier in the week because we knew this before we even had the dates. We knew who the opponents were. The Bears got screwed. We're somewhere between cable TV and the censors and the FCC, so I think screwed's okay here. The Bears got screwed in one respect. Now, the entire NFC North is playing the NFC West and the AFC North, which I believe were the two best divisions in football last year and probably will be again this year, or at least, it's starting to shape up that way. And so we knew that. And the Bears and the Packers with the first and second place schedules add another first and second place team. And so when you look at the Chicago Bears, they now have, 10, not 10, they have 5 non-division road games road trips to make. They get the softies. They get the easier ones at home. They get the Bengals. They get the Giants at home. The Cardinals don't scare me. You look at the 49ers, who do worry me a little bit because they're going to be much better this year if Jimmy Garoppolo is healthy, but they come to Chicago. The Bears, the only winning team that they get at home is the 11-5 last year Baltimore Ravens. They go 2-11-5 Cleveland. They go 2-12-4 Pittsburgh. They go 2-12-4 Seattle. They go 2-10-6 Rams. Their combined record of their road opponents is 63-34. That's outside of the division. And then, we know going up to Lambeau. Now, the Bears actually play pretty well in Minnesota, so I won't worry about that. But to get those 5, out of division games and get all the tough ones on the road, I think that is going to be a bit of a challenge for them.
Yeah, that is going to be a bit of a challenge, especially when we're talking about these stadiums allowing some level of fans back in the building, and that's a thing that they haven't had to deal with. And it'll have been over a year by the time we get to the season. And you just look at the schedule in general, and I think I've seen some rankings out there that it's one of the toughest, if not the toughest, across the league. And again, we don't know what some of these teams are going to look like come the actual season, but it's really tough. And I mean, that Rams game to start the season is about as bad a way as you can start the season if you're the Bears trying to figure out everything they're trying to figure out as far as the quarterback position, and you're going up against a team that's got pretty high aspirations, and you're doing it in prime time, and we're just throwing it all out there with the Bears in week 1.
We got our first comment clearing up something. You might recognize the name.
Potsy is with us. I knew Potsy listened to the podcast. I didn't realize Mark Potash, guys, does an outstanding job on the
Absolutely.
Bears beat for the Chicago Sun-Times. And Potsy is letting us know. I just lost it on my screen though. Alternate home away schedule has never happened for the Bears. That's what we suspected. Wrigley Field always kept on the road to start the season in the old days, obviously because the Cubs were playing there. And so thank you, Mark, for weighing in. Thanks for being with us. And guys, when you're not at shawlocal.com, you got to check out Potsy and Pat Finley and Jason Leisure over at ChicagoSunTimesSports.com. They really do a nice job. I grew up in a time when it wasn't all clickbait. We weren't competing for every visit and view we could get. We've got a great group of media folks in Chicago. Bears are well covered, and Potsy's one of the best. Guys, I think the other thing that I looked for immediately in the schedule is Kyle, I don't see a 6-game losing streak in here. I mean, it can happen. It can happen. But when we looked at the schedule last year at this time, literally 1 year ago today, we said, whoa, look what's happening in the middle there. Now, they do get a fairly tough run before the bye. Where they have to, they go to Las Vegas. I don't think that's a horrible trip. I mean, I'm not saying the Raiders are bad, but it's certainly a game if the Bears are improved that they can win. But then they get the Packers, they get them here. Then they're at Tampa. Then they get San Francisco here. Then they're at Pittsburgh. And then they come out of the bye and they get Baltimore here. So you do have 3 of those games here. But that is the roughest stretch of basically 4 out of 5 playoff opponents. That even that comes up a game short of the 6-gamer, and I don't see them losing all 5 of those, at least not right now in May.
Yeah, those weeks 6 through 9 are all tough. The first half of this schedule, I think weeks 1 through 9 are kind of rough on the Bears. Outside of maybe the Detroit, I think Cincinnati's going to be improved. I don't think they're a playoff team yet, but I think they're going to be better. Right out of the gate, we've seen how much the Bears have struggled offensively against the Rams these last few years. This is going to be the 4th time in a row, right, that they've played in primetime, going out to LA to a Rams team that I think we all expect to be better with Matt Stafford at quarterback. So that's going to be a tough way to start.
It will be. As I look at it, the Rams will certainly be better with Matt Stafford. I'm not sure the defense will be quite as good, with some of the changes that were made there. But as long as Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey are there, you know that's a really tough putt. I think what makes the first half so hard is that those Rams and Bengals games are on the road. Not Bengals. The Rams and the Browns are the one I was looking for.
Yeah, Browns are on the road.
Yeah, and that's what troubles you a little bit because I don't think Cincinnati is going to be much improved. Maybe I'm wrong, but even if they are, it's still going to be a winnable game. They can handle Detroit. If they had the Rams or the Browns at home, you might feel better about what would probably be an upset. Well, I don't know if it'd be an upset, but what would be more winnable for them than having to make those two trips early.
I think the Bengals are going to score a lot. I just think they're also going to give up a lot of points. Going to be a lot of shootouts there.
The problem I have with that, Kyle, is that I don't know that Joe Burrow is going to be starting quarterback early in the season. ACLs are different for everybody.
That's true. I'm kind of assuming that the way things sound like they're progressing, at least the public facing, that he's doing pretty well, but you never know.
Yeah, I don't, and Kyle, I don't want to get bogged down in the Bengals, but the other piece of this is I'm not sure that Zach Taylor is going to survive this season. He's just quietly been hidden there because they've been so bad, and they had to get Burrow, and it was clearly a rebuild in his first 2 years. But he's got to win more this year, and we don't really know what kind of coach he is, so that'll be interesting to see too. But beyond that, guys, I think the good news in the schedule, Sean, we're kind of focused here on these first 10 weeks. If there is an easier half, it is the second half, and so a couple things can happen there. The Bears can be improved. They may have found a rhythm. Maybe Andy Dalton has become a good game manager because that's the best they can hope for. Or flip it around, maybe coming out of the bye, Justin Fields is the starting quarterback. So, either way, the fact that second half of the schedule is clearly the easier half, it's not necessarily easy, but it appears to be the easier half, is probably a break that the Bears catch.
There's a lot of winnable games there when you look at that. They got the Lions, they got the Cardinals is a winnable game, they got the Vikings twice, the Giants are in there, and especially I look at the end of that schedule. If they're fighting for a playoff spot, week 17, the Giants at home, week 18 against the Vikings on the road. I mean, those are winnable games. And you think, if they can get themselves in decent enough position, you got to like your chances there to at least give yourself a shot to make the playoffs. If they're like they have in recent years, if they're hovering around 500 and with the extra playoff spot that puts them in play there. And, there's some winnable games here. And yeah, the Justin Fields thing is going to be interesting to see. Is he going to take over mid-season? Could that bye week be a target to get him in there after that and see what happens? I think, wins and losses and Andy Dalton's play is going to tell us a lot about that before we get to that point.
We'll get into the quote plan, close quote for Justin Fields in a little while, certainly before we sign off. But, Kyle, therein lies it's fun. It's not a problem. But the issue with doing this, you said the Bengals. I think the Giants are a team on the schedule that could be a lot better this year than they were last year. And especially now you're getting them much later in the year. I don't know if Daniel Jones is the answer at quarterback or not, but that defense was getting better the second half of the season. Saquon Barkley, is going to be 15 months removed from his ACL at that point. Remember, it happened week 2 here in Chicago last year. You look at what they've added at receiver. To me, that's a team that could be one of the fun, you're putting it in the win column now, and then you get to it in December, and I'm not so sure.
Yeah, Evan Ingram is another receiving weapon there that I continue to like. He's kind of been a little uneven. I think the big question with the Giants in terms of how much of a step forward they can take is, can Daniel Jones stop turning the ball over? It's been a lot of fumble issues. He makes some really nice throws, and then there's just some that you sit there and you're dumbfounded by. But we talk about trying to project ahead, and we're looking at the back half of the schedule. A game that I think is more winnable down the stretch, that at least could become more winnable, is that Seattle game. I know it's on the road. Seattle plays well at home. I did not like the way that Seattle team finished last year. I don't think they've improved much in the offseason. Obviously, there's a little bit of internal strife going on there. I don't think that's maybe as scary as people assume.
You could be right, Kyle. I never, Seattle's a team that I try not to analyze in the offseason because they always go off the board in the draft.
That's
They
true.
do some strange things in free agency. And yet look at Pete Carroll's track record with John Schneider, and Russell Wilson's going to be there. And we know that. And that's the difference. And it was really Russell Wilson, as much as anybody, whose plays started to slip those last 4 weeks. I think it was 4 or 5 weeks of the season that had them struggling. And yet, don't forget, they still did hang on to win that division. They just weren't playing their best football by the time they got there. And going to Seattle, you see, there's an example. I mean, you just don't want to go to Seattle, period. I mean, when they're bad, it's one of the toughest places in the league to play, and it's just kind of the way the schedule fell for these guys this year. So, always fun to debate and play with. Sean, it's interesting. Kyle mentioned, one of the toughest schedules. That this is not opinion. What everybody does is they look at the schedule based on the records of last year's opponents, and based on that, the Bears have the third toughest schedule in the NFL. Now, I'd be surprised if the Packers weren't second, or they probably are second because they get the first place teams. The Bears get the second place teams outside of division, but it's probably just by a game or two. But you're going to see the Bears and the Packers in the top three there. And then, we don't know how good the NFC North is going to be. Kyle mentioned, let's get into that a little bit. I think we touched on it last week with their draft. Not much has changed since. Obviously, the drama in Green Bay continues. And Sean, Aaron Rodgers is going to be their starting quarterback on opening day. I don't feel that's the least bit controversial in saying it. I don't bet, but I would bet a lot on that. That said, I just don't think that team is as good as 13-3. And I look at what they did again in the draft, and now with all this drama, even if Rodgers is there, it's going to leave an after effect. The Packers scare me a little bit less this year than they do most years.
I would agree with that, but at the same time, it's still they're the top dog in this division, and while they might not be 13-3, I sure think they're going to be a pretty darn good team, assuming Aaron Rodgers is there. And you're right, most likely we think Aaron Rodgers is going to be their quarterback. There's still that there's a reason he's said these things, and we've got a little bit of doubt now, and who knows how that's going to play out over these next weeks and months. And for the Bears' sake, you're hoping, things continue to go down a sour path, but there's still there's always a way to reconcile these things. We saw, all the talk was overblown with Russell Wilson, a couple of months ago, and maybe this will play out in a similar manner. And Aaron Rodgers will be starting come week 1, but I still think there's some doubt in our minds. I don't know, Kyle, what do you think about that situation?
There's like a 10% creeping in, and that's not 10% chance he's traded. There's like just a 10% chance that it actually matters. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. I'm guessing by the time we get to late August, this is all going to seem like a distant memory to us. Will be, most people, including Vegas, will have the Packers as the favorite to win the NFC North. I think that they were a soft 13-3 last year. Don't get me wrong; they were the best team in the NFC North, but I thought they were more like a 10 or 11 win team. But that's how the NFL goes. You have some breaks go their way. If they slide back a little bit like I expect, I still think they're the best team in the NFC North. Still need more help at wide receiver. Defense is okay, but doesn't scare me.
Yeah, I mean, guys, let's be clear here. I didn't say I wouldn't be picking the Packers to win the division. In fact, I'm pretty sure I will. I just don't think that they're going to be quite the climb for the other three division teams that they've been the last couple of years. At the end of the day, I'm the most adamant, I guess, in saying Rodgers will be. There's really only one way out of this whole quarterback thing, guys, and that's a straight up trade. Aaron Rodgers for Russell Wilson, and maybe one team or the other has to throw something in. It has cap ramifications, but it's the only way either one of those guys it's the only logical way that either one of those guys would make sense. I'm not saying I would do it. I'm not saying I would prefer it if I was Seattle or the Packers, but as you look at everything around it, so you go beyond that, we say Rodgers is going to be there. Words have meaning. Words leave scars, and he's been such a tool, over the last month or two that I don't think that you can just walk away and say he'll be back and everything will be okay. I find that very hard to believe. I think he'll be okay with most of his teammates. How'd you like to be Devontae Adams? Kyle, you saw, I'm sure, his remarks the other day. He's waiting on a contract extension that he has absolutely earned and is entitled to. Because he's next up, he should be the highest paid receiver in the NFL. Nothing's going to happen while they're trying to figure out Aaron Rodgers' situation. And Aaron Rodgers doesn't care about Devontae Adams. The only thing Aaron Rodgers seems worried about is Aaron Rodgers. I mean, that kind of stuff, we're not in the locker room. We're not behind the scenes. We're not in conversations with these guys, but they're normal people. And I can tell you, it does have effects on some of these guys, if not all of them.
Yeah, I'm sure what it does probably is divides the locker room a little bit. There are people that are probably close with Aaron that are going to understand why he feels that way. And there are people like, we don't know how Devontae Adams truly feels, but there are people that are looking to get that payday. And yeah, this has a chance to divide a locker room, which NFL coaches or any football coach will start screaming the second there's a chance of a rift inside of a locker room. That does not end well for teams.
Sean, the team that I definitely do expect to be better this year is the Minnesota Vikings. We knew going in last year they had blown up that defense because of salary cap issues. Then they brought in Michael Pierce, and he opts out. They lost Danielle Hunter to injury. He should be back. They've added some more nice pieces offensively. As long as they've got Dalvin Cook and Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson, they're going to be fine. Now, there could be some drama there, over all the reports that they wanted Justin Fields, and then they go take Kellen Mond, and you've got Kirk Cousins in the last year of his deal. So again, I'm not predicting great things for them, but I look at the talent there, and I do expect them to be a better football team this year than they were last year.
Yeah, I do too. And that defense was so bad last year at times. And I look for them to be much improved in that area. And yeah, as long as Kirk Cousins stays healthy, I think they're going to be in the mix here. I don't know that you want to throw Kellen Mond in there particularly early if Cousins gets an injury or something, that could spell trouble for them. But I do expect them to be much improved. And when you got a guy like Dalvin Cook, I mean, you can't rule out that type of production.
I'll tell you what, guys. I actually think that the Vikings, I'm going to go out on a limb here. I think the Vikings might be a top 3 offense this year. Maybe that's not going out on a limb. I mean, you could see it kind of last year. The receivers, obviously top 2, very good. Dalvin Cook is, he might be the best running back in the league right now. He's certainly in that conversation. But the offensive line was already improving after it had kind of been in shambles for a few years. Riley Reif really struggled in run blocking last year. They went ahead and cut ties with him and then drafted Christian Darrisaw, who it's going to slide in at left tackle, and they really like as a run blocker. Dalvin Cook is going to have a huge year. And if Kirk Cousins can just not trip over himself in big games, this offense should be able to put up a lot of points.
Yeah, I agree with your overall premise, Kyle. I don't necessarily agree that the offensive line was much improved, and I think Christian Darrisaw is a great get for them, but I still don't know that it's enough, and we'll see how he does as a rookie. But I would go back to you for a minute, Sean. Kellen Mond is not Justin Fields. Yeah, I mean, I know you know that, but I mean, the plan isn't going to be very similar. I don't think they even know that he's the quarterback of the future. They wanted to get another warm body. I don't think there's any plan to get him on the field. I'm not even sure he'll be number 2. I doubt that he will, to be honest with you. I expect there'll be another veteran there. So this is Kirk Cousins' year to cement his future. Either he does well enough to force them to give him another deal, or he enhances his value around the league. I mean, he's the same age as Robert Griffin III. They're just 30 in their early 30s. So we'll see what happens there. You look at the Detroit Lions, guys, and I really like what Brad Holmes is doing. But with all their receivers and Matt Stafford gone, they've obviously, they could have the best offensive line in football with Penny Sewell and Frank Ragnow and of course, Taylor Decker. But they don't have much around that. And then defensively, they've made some nice moves, but there was a lot of work to do. So I think they'll be an improved football team, but I expect still a sub 500 football team.
Yeah, I like what they did in the draft. Obviously you get a guy like Penei Sewell, that's the top tackle in the entire draft. That's a great pick for them. They picked up a couple of defensive tackles, addressed that position. But you're right. I mean, it's hard to see what exactly this passing game is going to look like because not a lot of those guys are there. It's
going to look bad. That's what it's going to look like.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it's going to look like.
I mean, I listen. I'm about as big as a Jared Goff hater as you're going to find. I don't expect good things in this offense. I mean, Brashad Perriman as your number one receiver is just laughable to me. I mean, a bust of a draft pick. He has at least been able to hang around the league the last couple of years. But I mean, Tyrell Williams is actually I think a better player. He just can't stay healthy ever. And then this defense, particularly, you look at some of the offenses that they're going to face just in the division. We go back to the Green Bay. There's no one. They have no one on this roster that's going to go down Devontae Adams, Justin Jefferson. I think week in, week out, teams are going to be able to throw all over this Detroit Lions defense.
Well, yes. I mean, again, we all agree the Lions aren't going to be very good. The one thing I would say about the offense is they do think they can run the football now, and they definitely have upgraded, even without Kerryon Johnson or Adrian Peterson. They've certainly upgraded the running back room, and with that offensive line, I think that's going to be the plan. The problem is that if all you can do is run and you can't throw, you better be pretty good on defense. And so I love what they've done. I call it the Jim Finks plan. You've got the offensive line set. You use your next two picks on defensive linemen. The problem is that it was a down year for defensive linemen to begin with, and I'm just not sure that I don't see these kids that they got. Maybe Uzurike, starts as a rookie, but I don't see them being immediate impact guys. And they really needed to address linebacker. Instead, Christian Jones is now a Bear. I thought Micah Parsons was going to be their guy, but I love what they did. I would not have passed Penny Sewell. I thought Parsons was the best defensive prospect in the draft, but I thought Sewell was the second best overall prospect in the draft behind Trevor Lawrence. And at left tackle, you got to do that. So like what they did, but don't see it impacting the division all that much this year. So unless you guys have any other thoughts on the North, I do want to talk about, quote, the plan, close quote, for Justin Fields.
Before we get into that, we do got a couple questions here that we should get to. I'll throw the first one up here from Dwight on here.
Dwight knows that he's been hurt a lot lately, but it'd be worth to bring Alshon Jeffrey back for a reasonable price. If any cornerbacks or safeties been released, that would be an improvement for the Bears. Dwight, my answer on Alshon Jeffrey is if it was at or near the veteran minimum, I probably wouldn't have a problem with it. You have to remember that the reason Alshon Jeffrey left is he never wanted to be in Chicago in the first place. So not that he had a bad experience here. I don't think he did, but I don't think it's first on his list. Now, he's on the street, and so you don't know what he would do to want to play. The problem is that he and Allen Robinson are pretty similar receivers. We saw that when he was here with Brandon Marshall. And even though they both had big years, the passing game was still never consistent. I think as long as you've got A-Rob, you're more focused on some of these slots guys, more speed. So I'm not against Alshon Jeffrey coming back, but I don't think it's real likely. And then guys, as far as cornerback and safety, absolutely not. I mean, they brought all the veterans back. Somebody else's veterans aren't going to be an improvement. Cornerback, Sean, I think they like the competition. I think they've got a lot of potential there. And if you're talking about street vets now, you're talking about getting older, and cornerback is not a position you really want to get older at.
No, I think they're likely to stick out with what they have, and they want to see what they have in Desmond Trufant, and maybe that works out better than it did for him in Detroit last year. And they like Kindle Vildor a lot, and we got to talk with the Bears assistants this week, and they just sort of reiterated that Vildor was a guy who was pretty unproven before he got some significant time there at the end of the season last year, and they liked what they saw from him. And then they have some depth there with some other guys. Artie Burns coming back from an injury, and Trey Roberson could be in the mix too. And I would be surprised. Obviously injuries can always happen, and that can force your hand a little bit. But I think right now they're going to just move forward with what they got.
Yeah, Kyle, I've been a little surprised by this perception out there that they have this huge need at cornerback. And I think it's more about what they lost than what they don't have.
Exactly.
When you lose one of the top 5 to top 7 corners in the game, and I absolutely believe that's what Kyle Fuller is, it's going to hurt unless you get another top 5 to top 7, and they didn't do that. But when they signed Desmond Trufant, he was the guy they picked. He's the veteran street vet. He's going to almost certainly be the opening day starter, and they'll see how much he has left. But when you look at what's competing behind him, we've talked about this. Artie Burns had at least claimed the starting position before tearing that ahead of Jalen Johnson last year before tearing that ACL. They brought in Tease Tabor, who's failed with 2 other teams, but this is a second-round pick 4 years ago. Nice prospect out of Florida. They fully believe that Kendall Vildor is eventually going to be the starting corner across from Jalen Johnson. And I saw enough to suggest that that is possible. The question is it a good idea on September 12th? It may take a little while. And then we just talked the other day with both Deshae Townsend, the secondary coach. He specialized with the cornerbacks. We talked to Sean Desai about this. They like Roberson, and they still like Michael Joseph. He's still here too. So they feel that they've got a ton of competition at the position, and I can't really argue with that.
Yeah, I agree. Going back quickly to Dwight's first question about Alshon, a guy that I think was underappreciated during his stint in Chicago, but the soft injury tissues continued throughout Philly. When he was on the field, watching him last year, he just can't move anymore. I'm pretty sure. I don't think he's going to find a team this year unless someone gets really desperate. But the feeling, it's a combination of about the loss of Kyle Fuller. And I think there's there's certainly some hesitancy from Bears fans wondering if Desmond Trufant can stay on the field and how effective he will be. And also because of Jalen Johnson having the shoulder issue in college and then missing the end of last year, separate issues. But as a general fan, it kind of blends together. So I think they worry a little bit about depth. The Bears don't feel that way. Trufant probably at this point was the best guy they were going to get. They do really like Vildor, and I think they want to see what they have in Artie Burns and Trey Roberson. There's probably not going to be any more moves made in the secondary.
Well, and the other piece of it, guys, is they still got a huge cap issue. I mean, they don't have money to spend, really. Now, the guys that are left are going to sign near the minimum, and all that does is add the difference between what they signed for and the guy at the bottom of the roster right now. So you're maybe only talking $250,000 to $500,000, but they are technically over the cap at the moment. And they're not now that Charles Leno is gone, but they will be at or slightly above it again when they get their rookies signed, or at least very close to it. So they don't have a lot of room to maneuver here. And my sense is that they are probably done. I think what I would keep an eye on is if Trufant or Johnson got hurt and was going to miss time, they'd probably then want another veteran corner. There are some decent journeyman veteran corners still out there, but if there's a move left, I think it's more likely it could be a veteran tackle. It's nice to say Tevin Jenkins is going to be a day one plug and play rookie starter at left tackle, but those guys are few and far between, and you don't really want Elijah Wilkinson over there. So.
Are you saying that you don't also believe Juan Castillo when he's saying that Jermaine Ifedi can be a Pro Bowl right tackle?
I listen, I like Juan Castillo, but I don't think even Juan would be offended when I say I don't believe a lot of what Juan tells us. And I say that in a good way. I mean, he's selling his guys. He's being positive. Oh, yeah. He's doing what he has to do. He's an interesting guy to cover, and I kind of like Juan. And it's interesting because I had heard some strange things about him before he got here, and I was prepared to struggle with it a little bit, but I've adapted, and I find him kind of entertaining, and he appears to be doing a decent job. He certainly improved that line the second half of last season, but he knows damn well Jermaine Ifedi's not a Pro Bowl right tackle. I mean, the reason Jermaine Ifedi became a Chicago Bear is because he was a miserably failed right tackle with the Seattle Seahawks. Nobody wants that one, huh?
I don't have much to add to that. It looks like is Kyle
here? Kyle froze for a second there.
I dropped for a second. I missed the fun at the end of Jermaine Ifedi there.
Well, no, all I was
saying. You got the gist of it.
Yeah, I mean, Jermaine Ifedi, who listen, I thought he did a nice job at guard, and when they made the switch, last 5-6 weeks, he did a decent job out there. But the reason Jermaine Ifedi is a Chicago Bear is because he was a terribly failed right tackle with the Seattle Seahawks. And so the idea that now, he's going to be a Pro Bowler or an All-Pro, I hope Juan's right, but I think Juan is just doing his job, supporting his guys and trying to, make everybody feel good about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I just laughed at it. I mean, he did play better at right tackle than I think a lot of us expected. But we got one more question here in the chat, and it's actually offensive line related. I'm not sure we're going to be able to answer it because it's pretty far down the roster, and the limited practice last year, or being able to view practice because of COVID restrictions, makes it a little difficult. But I'll throw it up here and see what you got, Hub.
Based on limited college tape and practice observation, what's the evaluation of Arlington Hambright and Latavius Simmons on the O-line? Will either stick? Joe, that's from Joseph LaPointe. Joe, thanks for joining us and listening. We got to see him until we weren't allowed to watch practice anymore. It was around mid-season when the COVID precautions changed. You can only see so much in practice, but you do get a sense of how the coaches work with these guys. You certainly can get a sense of who was active and who was not on game day. Hambright was clearly a little ahead of Latavius Simmons, but what's interesting is Simmons is probably purely a tackle, and they think he could even end up the swing tackle if he's any good, and I don't think we know that yet, but he probably could play left or right. Now, Hambright they liked because he played 4 or 5 positions on the line. I don't think he'd ever played center, and I think they kind of liked his potential as a guard, but they're pretty well stacked right now on the interior. I mean, you had Larry Borum, who is here to be the right tackle, but the reason you take him is the worst case is he can play guard if he doesn't play right tackle. And so you've got him, you've got Bars, you got Daniels playing guard, even though he's a center, Cody Whitehair, and Jermaine Ifedi maybe still should end up back at guard. So I don't know, especially with 2 more rookies here, what their chances. They could end up back on the practice squad. Part of the trick here, guys, is you still, even though the rosters were expanded to 55 last year, that was 53, and then each week you could bring 2 guys off the practice squad to make it a 55 game day roster, and then you decided which guys were active, but you still have to cut down to 53. And so this is about who are you willing to expose to waivers. Now, I've already identified, I think I wrote about this in the depth chart columns. If you want to go to shawlocal.com, I've tried to project the opening day depth charts on offense and defense. And even though you don't know that he's officially a Chicago Bear yet, because he isn't, but we will find out between now and the first practice on Friday at rookie camp. Charles Snowden is an undrafted rookie free agent out of Virginia. He's one of those kind of special guys that we call him priority UDRFAs. 6'7", 240 pounds, just learning to play the position, 83-inch wingspan. The guy's an albatross. He's an edge rusher. He's going to make the team, if for no other reason because his ceiling is so high. And if they try to get him to the practice squad, somebody's going to claim him. And so now you start taking spots away that way, and you play the numbers game. And so I think it may be 8 offensive linemen instead of 9. And even if it's 9, it's going to be a swing tackle. So I think Hambright and Simmons' best chances is to get back to the practice squad. But Sean Simmons, if he shows enough, he could be the swing tackle. You don't know. He could be that 9th offensive lineman.
I'm still trying to get over an 83-inch wingspan. That's 6'9". That's quite the arm length on that guy. And yeah, I mean, Hub, you know this better than probably most. I mean, that was a really good breakdown there of just what we're looking at here heading into the summer and really what it's going to come down to for some of these guys towards the end of the roster.
Yeah, it's funny you hear that and you think, my God, 7 feet. But if you think about it, he's got 35.5-inch arms. So right there, you're over 6 feet, and then it's just shoulder to shoulder. So you get there pretty quick. But it is unusual. There's not a lot of guys like that in the league. And it's just, it kind of brings up memories of actually a good friend. He lives here in Oak Park, even though he was never a Bear. But Hall of Famer Ted Hendricks, the Mad Stork, was the guy who
sorry,
yes.
I didn't mean to cut you out. I was talking about Simmons and Hambright. There's been many a night during preseason I've sat in that Soldier Field press box and just prayed for a game to end during those preseason games. But for guys like that, those 3 games having them back this year, it makes a big difference for those offensive linemen in the trenches.
It makes a huge difference. Now, we're assuming those games are scheduled right now, and I don't think COVID would stop them from being played, but there is still back and forth going on between the players and the owners. I call it negotiating the rules of engagement because there is still pandemic concerns, and they probably will be played. And Sean, I think Kyle makes an excellent point because that's the only chance that a guy like a Simmons or a Hambright really has to make the team. You just, there's not enough contact. There's not enough, full speed blocking in practice to know if these guys can do it at this level or not.
Yeah, and that made it really hard last year not having those preseason games, and really even the days that they did have were limited compared to what they had back in 2019 as far as training camp. So I think the NFL is going to do everything they can to get those preseason games back and up and going here in August. Guys,
I'll tell you how much they seemed to like Simmons is if you recall, He actually was elevated from the practice squad, was on the roster, and was going to be active for that Titans game when they went down to Tennessee. And then, unfortunately, he tested positive. And I remember, Castillo Juan was telling us how horrible he felt for the kid. And the kid, his family was there. They were, they were allowing some fans in the stadium in Nashville. But they actually did think enough of him just prior to midseason last year to activate him. So obviously, they think that there's a chance he can play at this level. But he certainly is deep on that tackle depth chart right now behind, Jenkins and Borum, and more importantly, Elijah Wilkinson and Jermaine Ifedi. So it would be pretty tough for him to make the roster.
I forgot about that, Hub. He was a Tennessee State guy in college, so he was coming right from Nashville, and that was supposed to be his homecoming. Yeah, that was a tough story.
We got one more question. It's also cornerback related here. I'll throw it up here. I just pulled up the answer for us, but I'll let you read it, Hub.
Remy is saying, appreciates the football talk and coverage. Keep up the great work. Thank you, Remy. We do the best we can. What free agents are left for cornerback? Seems like they're one injury away from a massive problem. If you've got it up, Kyle, I'm going to let you do it. There's a few names, but I don't know what's happened in the last few days. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's not particularly interesting at this point.
Is Brian Poole still there?
Brian Poole is still there.
And what about Bashan Greelen?
Bashan Greelen is still there. Richard Sherman is still there. Steven Nelson at 28 years old is one of the younger guys on this list. Gary and Conley, who was been very unimpressive. But yeah, there's not a lot left out there.
Yeah, I've been trying to keep an eye on this, and I was watching Breland and Bashan Greelen and Brian Poole, because they're two guys with starting experience on playoff teams who they never had a season quite to the level that Desmond Trufant played, but they'd be in that category. The other guys, Kyle, that you just mentioned, they as draft picks, they looked good, but there's a reason they're on the street right now, with the obvious exception of Richard Sherman. And that, it would be intriguing. I don't know at 33, he may even turn 34 this year, what's left. Remember, he had a stunning all-pro season 2 years ago, but then he was so banged up last year and just, I don't know. I think that's something you just wait and see how much longer he's out there. You see if you have a big injury.
Yeah, I agree. We got Potsy chiming back in here, so I'll throw this up for you.
From Potsy, thanks for the Ted Hendricks. He raises me a Ben Davidson. Great blast from the past. Potsy and I have fun as he's not nearly as old as I am, but we've been on the beat the longest. We've been around as long, and so we get to do a little history. And Potsy, I'm giving you back a Buck Buchanan, so take that one. That's even before Potsy, probably. But these guys, what they all have in common, for those of you who don't know, is that they're all 6'7" or taller. And Davidson and Buchanan were actually huge, almost 300 pounders. Hendricks was actually about 250 the whole time he played. And I believe all three of them Hall of Famers. Certainly Hendricks is. I don't think Ben Davidson is. I don't know. Maybe Potsy can help me with that. But guys, the one more subject we want to get to, because we are running short on time here, is, I mentioned off the top that as you look at the schedule, one of the intriguing things about that Week 10 bye is that as the season develops, more likely, if it's not going the way you hoped, as opposed to the way you do hope it goes, it could set up for a Justin Fields, baptism, if you will, coming out of that bye against the Ravens. I know that's what they hope won't happen. I can't imagine, Kyle, that the blueprint suggests that they'd want him out there any sooner than that. Obviously, they're going to watch him in practice. They're going to watch him in the preseason. If he is just that much more ready than anybody expects, I think I wrote about this, and I think I've even talked about it here. I'm not saying anything about opening day. You got all these crazies out there who just want him out there opening day, consequences be damned. And that's just stupid. It just ignores history. It tells you have a much better chance of ruining them than developing them. But that's not what should be. There shouldn't be a date marked on the calendar. What you don't want to do is put him out there too soon. If you find out that he's way ahead of where you thought he was and that he is closer to being ready, then fine, get him out there week 3, week 5, week 7, opening day, whatever it be. I just don't know how they're going to see enough to suggest that, especially with Dalton getting all the first team reps. I don't see any scenario under which he's out there opening day, but I could see the plan being built around having him ready by that bye week, depending on how the first 9 weeks go.
Yeah, if Andy Dalton is getting the first team reps this summer and into training camp, we'll see how that goes. If that actually is the case, then your odds of seeing him early in the season greatly decrease unless he really forces the issue. I feel like coming out of the bye, that's going to be a long time. That's a big ask. I feel like there's going to be a lot of pressure, obviously, externally, of course. And unless Andy Dalton really, really plays well, you have to think that's going to be building a little bit internally. If they're just kind of, barely getting by, that's going to build pretty quickly, I would think, Sean.
Well, yeah, and we're talking going back now to the beginning of the show, how tough that first half of the schedule is. I mean, certainly if this thing goes down quickly and the losses start piling up, there's going to be more and more reason to want to put him in here. Not that they should, but if the playoffs are looking like a slim possibility, at that point you might as well just go for it. And coming out of the bye is a good one, but they do have the Ravens. That's certainly not an easy ask for a rookie quarterback, but I think we're just going to have to wait and see how this plays out. I don't know. Do you guys think that there's any chance he could sit the whole year?
Yeah, I think there's a real chance that could happen. Where that probably goes away is twofold. If they are a playoff team, then they're going to want to rest at least week 18, or week 17. And so, he might get in there exactly the way Patrick Mahomes did. Or the flip side of it is if the season gets away from him, then I think you start to accelerate everything. And that's where Kyle kind of focused on that week 10 bye.
Yeah, it's hard to put, I guess. The recent experience of watching the Miami Dolphins feel like they had to set the timeline of coming out of that bye to throw Tua in there when Ryan Fitzpatrick was playing well, and then we saw Tua really struggle. Makes me hesitant to say that they would automatically target that. I think the question a lot of fans have, and Hub as the veteran of the group that has been to plenty of Bears camp.
You can say the old man. That's all right.
As the veteran of the group that has seen the young quarterbacks through the years come into Bears training camp, as what do you watch for to know a kid is progressing, that is picking up a playbook, that is moving at the NFL speed, at the speed of the game that you need him to be at to be able to throw him into a regular season game?
Well, this is where you so desperately need the preseason games, because in practice, they practiced against each other every day. It's going to be pretty hard for Sean Desai to disguise a coverage against even a rookie quarterback in Justin Fields by day 3, day 5, day 7, whatever it may be. And we already know he's an athlete. We already know he's got the arm talent. We already know there's some minor tinkering that needs to happen with his mechanics. So that's where these preseason games become so important. And I would expect, what we don't know is the Nick Foles equation. I mean, I think if he's here, Nick Foles is the number 2, not Justin Fields. I mean, that's the irony, is that Foles may be the best backup quarterback in the NFL. So what's really critical, I think, is that you probably have got Andy Dalton the first 2 drives, maybe the first quarter of that first exhibition game. Then I'd play Fields the rest of the way. I think, week 2, Dalton probably never gets more than a quarter. You probably want to get Foles a quarter or 2 somewhere along the way. But for the most part, ideally, you start Fields in the third one to give him that starting experience, and you get him 2.5 to 3 quarters week 1 or week 2. At that point, you've got the equivalent of 2 full games, at least running against other defenses. And that's what I want to see, is what does he see? Because guys, I don't want to pee on anybody's parade. I'm excited like everybody else. I think it was the right move. I think it's a great pick. I think he's got a chance to finally be the answer. But what were the doubters saying? What were the critics saying? The reason he slid, the reason he was there is the 4th quarterback off the board. The reason that the Bears were able to come up to 11 again, yes, the epilepsy was surprising, but teams are too smart for that. They have doctors. They know that shouldn't be an issue. The knock on the scouting report before the epilepsy story broke was they were unhappy with some of his processing and the way he was reading the field late last season. And so to me, that's the key to the whole thing.
I agree, because what I already know is going to happen is you're going to hear that the coaches are going to talk him up no matter what, right? That's just how NFL teams are going to operate. And we've already kind of heard it in terms of him, how he's learned the playbook, how he's tackled the playbook these last couple of weeks going into this rookie minicamp. And I expect we're going to hear that a lot over the rookie minicaps as we get into the other stuff about how well he's picking up the playbook and all that. And immediately you're going to have fans go, oh, see, he's getting it quickly. He can be good to go. But the Matt Nagy playbook, as to some people, get very aggravated by it. It's very complicated and very big. And trying to learn that on the fly and get into the NFL, or doing that during rookie minicamp and over the summer, and then doing that at game speed, are two completely different animals. Unless he blows you away, I mean, Andy Dalton is going to be out there early in the season and maybe into midseason.
Well, and Sean, here's the other piece of that, because Kyle is spot on, is rookie quarterbacks by the end of their rookie year are still forgetting their own plays in the huddle. I mean, it takes them forever to have instant recall and complete memory on all the terminology, on making sure that they've got the right personnel groups, the right formations, getting guys lined up properly. I mean, we see it constantly, even in their second and third year, where there's extra timeouts being taken because they couldn't get it straight on the field. He's got to get all of that before we even focus on whether he's reading defenses correctly. I mean, it is an absolute process. And yeah, you can make the argument about, Russell Wilson, Ben Roethlisberger, they took teams to the playoffs their rookie years. But look at how good those teams were that they took to the playoffs. The Bears are not that. And then you turn it around, you look at the Hall of Famers in Tom Brady and Drew Brees, who sat for a full season, and Aaron Rodgers, who sat for 3 full seasons. And pretty much all the experts agree it benefited them. So I think what Bears fans have to get used to is the idea that there is no benefit whatsoever to getting him on the field as soon as possible.
Yeah, and I thought in talking with quarterback coach John DeFilippo this week, obviously, like you guys are saying, everybody's positive right now. It's all positive, but there was a little bit of honesty in the fact that, he's excited for this weekend's rookie minicamp just because he gets to see this guy in action, and it's not just spitting things back over Zoom. It's not meetings anymore. They're going to actually be on the field and get to see how his mind works a little bit. So, they're just at the beginning of this process. It's going to be going on all summer long, and possibly into the fall. So we'll just have to see how that goes, and I don't know how much honesty we're going to get from them, but we're going to have to read it a little bit throughout the summer.
Kyle, I think we can maybe wrap on what we know and what we still don't know. The reason that they finally just bit the bullet and Mitch Trubisky is not here anymore clearly comes down to his field generalship and his processing. I don't think anybody's going to argue that. He's a good enough athlete. He's got enough arm talent. And Nagy and his staff either convinced or Ryan agreed all along that it wasn't going to happen, that the light wasn't going to go on. So the biggest mistake they made was they drafted a kid who was too inexperienced, who couldn't do what he needs to do to play at this level, and then they put him on the field too soon. And that is not a mistake that they want to repeat. And so my guess is that they err on the side of caution here. Now, that's what we know. I just said guess. What we don't know is I didn't realize until really early February how unpleasant things apparently had gotten between Trubisky and the franchise. I'm not going to say him and Matt, him and whoever, that I don't know. But he apparently wanted to be back here even less than they wanted him back. And so, with a complete failure of saying the guy's a great talent, put him out there, I think they're going to learn from whatever mistakes they made and make sure that they develop this kid in a very different way. And unlike, Mitch, who was in the game third quarter, week 4 and starting week 5, I think they'd like to avoid that with Justin Fields.
Well, you'll never get them to talk about this on the record publicly, but I would love to hear what they learned from that experience, and maybe what caught them off guard with Mitch's development, and what they felt really stunted it, and what they need to do to avoid a repeat situation.
What they learned, I think you guys, we've talked about this, but one of my broadcast partners at Westwood One is Kurt Warner. Kurt and I have done a number of games together the last couple years, and so we get to spend time on the road, talk a lot about this. And he and I had long conversations about Trubisky. And by the way, he's one who isn't ready to quit on him yet, because he says this can be learned and taught. He said, but the problem, and he thinks Deshaun Watson's a great football player, but he has said that there's some concern with Watson with this too, is that they don't process quickly enough. And the reason mediocre athletes like Drew Brees and Tom Brady are lockdown first ballot Hall of Famers is that they process in an instant. And this is what you don't know about Justin Fields. Wherever he is at right now, it is a concern that some scouts had. And however high his ceiling is with that, they want to get him as close to that ceiling as they can before they're throwing him out there every week.
Sean, I'll let you go with that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a process for sure, and we'll get that started, I guess, a little bit with rookie minicamp here this weekend, and we'll have lots of coverage over at shawlocal.com.
It's going to be fun to watch. Maybe you care only because we can report for you. We, the media, are being allowed back out at Hallis Hall for the first time since last, I think it was early November. COVID protocols are still in place. We'll be in separate groups. We'll be masked. We'll be watching from a distance, but we'll get to watch. And so we'll be able to report for you what's going on. And Kyle, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of oohs and ahs the first time he throws the ball 70 yards in the air. But short of that, there's not a lot you can see here. You watch for accuracy more than anything else, and that has not been a concern. But I think that's something that will be significantly focused on with this first Justin Fields and Navy and Orange appearance.
Yeah, don't read too much into this weekend and the coming mini camps. My biggest takeaway is just get everyone through it healthy. That's always what you worry about early on, particularly not sure how great a shape everyone's going to be in coming off the COVID kind of restrictions, and it's a little bit different. So hopefully everyone gets through healthy and we get into training camp with everyone ready to go.
Well, and the other thing that you all need to get used to as we sign off this week is that I believe them when they say there is a blueprint, there is a plan, but they're never going to tell us what it is. And so all we can do is observe and report for you, and we'll begin to figure it out pretty quickly. But you're not going to get a proclamation that you're looking for as to finding out now when Justin Fields' first start is coming. So, guys,
that doesn't mean we can't ask them in 10,000 different ways, though, Hub.
Oh, we will. See, now he's getting to be a veteran already, Kyle. Sean, you give him 1 year on the beat, and he gets how the whole thing works. That's why we love him so much. You're absolutely right, buddy. We're going to be talking about it. I understand that, and it'll be fun, but at least it'll be some observational conversation now that we get to see him out on the football field for the first time this weekend. So, folks, we want to thank the people at Heinz Lumber. They've been really great in sponsoring these live streams for us, I guess, of our podcast is what we would call them. Heinz Lumber, 11 great locations throughout Chicago. If you've got a construction project, if you're rehabbing the house, if you're rebuilding, whatever your lumber and building needs are, make sure you go to our friends at Heinz, find the location nearest you. We want to thank all of you for joining and listening. We want to thank Potsy for contributing as well. And we really hope that you'll continue to join us each week. We're going to keep doing it this way as long as we know there's people out there watching. So get your questions ready for next week. We'll have a rookie minicamp under our belt. Hopefully a lot more to talk about. For this week, though, we are going to say thank you so much for being with us. Enjoy the weekend. It looked like spring may finally be here. Hopefully everybody can get out and have a good time. We'll talk to you again next week right here on our shawlocal.com Bears Insider podcast.